What's going on, everybody? Happy Father's Day. This is Black Men Sundays. I'm your host, Corey Sylvester Murray. We're talking about generational wealth, mental health, finance and business, and the three F's: faith, finances, and fitness.
It's a Black Man Sunday. Time to put all childish things away. I refuse to be the man I was yesterday. Gotta put my best foot forward and elevate.
One thing about life is that, especially with this podcast, this is our episode 115. You meet people where they're in powerful positions, and we've had guests, we've had accountants on, we've had lawyers on, we've had just every flavor of finance, brothers that invest in crypto, brothers that invest in the stock market that hit it big. We also have an abundance of CEOs. Every show, I ask every guest the same question, like outside of our normal pattern of people that we have in our lives, who should we be friends with? They say you should know somebody in the Chamber of Commerce. You should have some friends where, if you're trying to go on vacation, they own a beach house, call them. So what did I do? I said, Allie Braswell, Jr., by the way, African American Chamber of Commerce. This brother came on Black Men Sundays, blessed the stage. If you haven't heard that show, go back and listen to it. We're not going to do that. This is the masterclass. This is Black Men Sundays. But it was one day I was just on his Instagram, and it was a sister named Jennifer McNeil. Her name was like J-A-I. I didn't know if it was Jai, but she said it's J. MTS, and they were back and forth. I said, you know what? I need this sister on Black Men Sunday. So let's get it. Jennifer McNeil, MTS. This sister was born and raised in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. Second half of her life was in Charlotte, North Carolina. This sister lived in Silicon Valley, California, Miami, Florida. And not just Miami, but Coral Gables. You got to have some bread to stay out there. This sister is 19 years as a senior mortgage broker and senior underwriting manager. That's residential and commercial. This sister also currently is in FinTech as a senior technical writer, business execution consultant. This sister also is a CEO and the founder of Maven Leadership Solutions. She's also an author, Growth Zone. So without further ado, Jennifer McNeil, aka J McNeil, MTS. All due respect to our queens. Welcome to Black Men Sunday, sister. How you doing?
I am very well. Thank you so much for such a warm and inviting introduction, Corey. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Definitely. And I'm not done the intro. I just wanted to hear your voice first. This sister's also a vocalist. This sister wakes up every morning. She's a cyclist. She prays, she meditates, and she eats. She drinks. I can't say eats because she drinks plant-based protein shakes. So this show. So when we talk about Black Men Sundays, we talk about generational wealth, mental health, finance, business, and we're gonna hit them three F's up today. So in the three F's, in case y'all don't know, is faith, finances, and fitness. So out the gate, I just have to ask you. I'm in Orlando, Florida. You're in Orlando, Florida. I hear a lot of brothers saying, you know what? I've been renting my whole life. I would like to buy a house. I feel like when it's time for me to buy a house, I can't afford it because the rates are too high. Then the brothers that say that are in a house and they had a high rate, they're like, man, the insurance is killing me. So what advice would you give? I'm just warming you up real quick. What advice would you give for the brothers and sisters that are looking to invest in a home, but they have some apprehensions?
Well, first and foremost, that's a great question because it's going to be different for almost everybody. The first question I would ask myself if I were in the shoes of a person who's looking to be a potential homeowner is, how long am I going to stay in the city in which I'm looking to purchase in? And then the B or follow-up question to that would be, how long do I intend to stay in this particular home that I'm looking to buy? Those questions are great to start with because, if you are, someone who doesn't mind, given a little bit of time for interest rates to decrease, and you may be soon becoming an empty nester, you may not want to be in such a sizable home because, in 3 to 4 years, you may be exiting the property anyway. And then you may have someone who wishes to buy, but do it for a short amount of time and then turn it into an investment property because maybe someone like myself, I intended to move across the country after becoming an empty nester. So, just on that merit alone, Corey, that question can be answered in a multitude of ways, but I'll give you a breakdown for each of the scenarios. If someone is thinking about purchasing a home and they're currently a renter, one thing that is going to be unanimous no matter who you are is you're always going to need a place of residency. So, why not purchase a property and have a vested interest in acquiring equity, regardless of what the interest rate is, because you're going to always need a place to live. So if that's going to always be something that's not going away, because you're always going to need housing, why not get yourself in a situation if you're going to be spending the money anyway? Let it be a scenario in which you're acquiring wealth by building equity into the home. You do have people who are of the framework that believes that if you are in a home and you actually are staying in it, that it is not an asset at that time because you are living in it. And I subscribe to that as well. But at least for some people, that gets them on the roadmap of being able to think about, okay, I've lived here 2 years. I'm getting beyond the point of having equity in the home. And so therefore now I want to look for another property that will become my primary residence. And then I can make this existing property one that would be an investment property. And the advantage of taking that strategy is since you yourself have lived in the home, you'll be able to call for an interest rate that is specific to an owner occupied borrower versus you purchasing the property going into it as an investor. I think the strategy that I've just described is a most excellent way in which to be able to enter into the home buying process with thinking or forward thinking about being an investor on down the line. So that is the scenario for someone who is coming up upon the end of their lease and they're like, well, what the heck should I do next?
That's great. Great information. And, I see you, senior underwriting manager. I'm not going to lie. When I saw that, it scared me because I remember when I was buying my house, the underwriters would call me once a week.
Mhm.
Send me a pay stub. We need to see something. I'm like,
Yes.
we're not. I'm like, this is like July.
Mhm.
We weren't closing till September.
Yeah.
Every week. I mean, I'll be on, because I'm a news photographer. I was on a shoot. My wife will be blowing my phone. I'm thinking this in the emergency. They're like, no, the underwriter need to see something. Need to see something. So, what
Yes.
tips would you give for the brothers and sisters where they want to purchase a home, but from an underwriting perspective? Because I feel like to me, the underwriters really were the ones that said, okay, you're going to be able to make it to closing. The
Yes.
realtor was cool, but the
Mhm.
underwriters was the ones that were like, listen, if you want this house, you better do what I tell you.
That's right.
So, from an underwriting manager perspective, we're
Yes.
talking residential. We're gonna get to the commercial in a
Yeah.
minute. We're talking residential right now because I feel like
Mhm.
that's the biggest issue, and that's a lot of the
For
emails that I
sure.
get is from a residential perspective.
For sure.
Underwriting perspective, what tips can you give for brothers and sisters that, because I always hear the tip is, don't buy furniture for the house until you close. I hear people, as soon as they start underwriting, they start buying up everything, buying cars, and then they don't get it. But outside of that, what tips can you give for brothers and sisters that are trying to close, but they're just beginning the underwriting stage?
Yes. So just to help you be in the capacity of the roles that I've had, I started out as underwriting when I got into mortgage operations, and that's what you call that specific area of mortgage financing operations. So I started underwriting, then I got into becoming an underwriting manager, which managed the underwriters, and then the senior underwriting manager, which was my last role in underwriting, managed the underwriting managers. So they are the ones that pull the trigger, Corey. And so I handled all the escalations that were received from the underwriter, and maybe the underwriting manager did not have resolve for those scenarios. And so then they would get escalated to the senior underwriting manager. And so I would coordinate with the underwriting managers to help the actual underwriter. And a lot of the scenarios that would get escalated were discrepancies that they would see in the loan origination file. So the tips that you were offered, and it's quite customary, I'll tell you, for the underwriter to reach out to you once a week. It should never be taken as one of those things in which there's something wrong. It's actually a courtesy. It's a level of customer service that's being provided to you to check in once a week and let you know what things that have come through the waterfall that are still needed to get your file, not only from pre-approval stage to conditionally approval to final approval. So there's many stages of the loan process. When we pull the credit, that's just the first stage. There's a couple of different factors that have to be looked into: your credit, your income, and your assets. And so some things we don't know to ask for until we've actually gone in with our fine-tooth comb and done the verification of employment for income. And then we learn, okay, does the person have a loan that comes out of their paycheck, every 2 weeks to pay back something? And until we see the pay stub and really go line for line, there's some things that are still inconclusive until we receive the documentation. So that speaks to the point of why, as you're in the process, additional documentation can be required. And a loan officer, if they're really doing a good job, they set that expectation up front. Hey, Mr. Murray, throughout our process, there may be weekly check-ins from underwriting or processing. During these processes, as we're moving along, there are instances where we may call and require additional documentation as we uncover your file. So that's something that the loan officer should be setting that expectation up so that the borrower doesn't feel as though, oh, there's something is wrong in the interim of the process. Other tips is that you hit on, you're right. There's a to-do list, or should I say a what not to do list while you're in the mortgage process. And you're right. One of them is to not go out and acquire additional credit, because it can change the debt to income ratio. In most cases, depending upon what type of loan product you have, going to buy $10,000 worth of furniture, which is really not a lot these days. You could spend $10,000 just on your living room, depending upon where you shop. So just doing something like that could really kill your debt to income ratio. So a person who does that and does not take the advice of their underwriter or loan officer, they could end up with having a storage room full of furniture and no home to take it to. So you always want to be very honest, truthful, forthcoming from the very onset of the mortgage application, because your underwriting team, it is definitely within their due diligence to want to approve the loan, but you have to give us reasons. You have to have a qualifying credit score. You have to have suitable income. And then you have to have, a property that we're willing to lend on, which is where the appraisal comes in. We want to make sure that the home appraisal will match or exceed the value that we're willing to lend on. So those are some key tips to really be honest and forthcoming with your loan officer, because we can only help you with the information that we know. It's almost like having an attorney. They can't help you in litigation unless you give them all of the fact finding that they're going to uncover anyway, because there's certain LexisNexis and MERS types of systems that we use to pull the mortgage process together that helps us to do our due diligence. And so I promise you, everything is going to be validated in that application. We're going to find out those things that you do and do not disclose. It's just in your best interest to reveal those things up front so that we can build a strategy from the very point of application to help you navigate through the process, because your loan officer has the ability to write what is called letters of explanation to explain what happened. For instance, we're just coming off COVID, and for many people, they were out of work for more than 6 months. being out of employment for 6 months raises a red flag in the mortgage industry. However, if you let your loan officer know that that was something that happened to you, then from the very start of the application, they can develop a letter of explanation. This person was out of work for 6 months due to layoff, COVID, health reasons, had a baby, any of those things. And then they can address it right up front so that by the time it reaches underwriting, what underwriters do not like to do is, how did we get here? There's no explanation of what I'm looking at. The moment you provide those scenarios and letters of explanation up front so that they don't have to dig and fact find, you get a underwriter that will use their own discretion and be favorable for your loan going into conditionally approved because you've explained yourself up front. So that is the biggest takeaway that I'd like to say as far as a tip. Be completely transparent from the very onset of the application. I promise you it will work in your favor because you will have a team of mortgage professionals that will position you in the right way so that by the time it gets to underwriting, your mortgage application will be well received.
And that's great information because I've before we bought our house, the realtor and when we started the underwriting process, they were like, "Don't buy any furniture, don't go to Haverty's, don't." Back then,
It's true.
the kid tell you right, it's hot right now. The EVS,
Yeah.
all that's hot. Don't buy no cars, just
Not
go
that.
through the process. And for me, it was different because I kind of took an unconventional way of buying my house.
Mhm.
Instead of like using money, I basically said, like the underwriter told me, because I'm a shoe person. So I
Oh, okay.
sell, so I'm a shoe seller. I wear shoes. You can ask my man Gary, we were at FAMU, always had to fly his shoes, but I learned I could use the shoes to leverage my equity. So what I did
Mhm.
was I basically told the underwriter, and like it was funny because they were looking at me like, "So you're gonna buy this house with shoes?" I'm like, "Yeah." So they said, "Okay."
Yes.
So they said, "Here's what we want you to do for the next 3 months.
Mhm.
Don't spend a penny of your paycheck.
Right.
Live off the shoes." I
Mhm.
said, wow. But every week they were calling me, "Hey, did you
Yeah.
sell something? How much?" and all that. So that leads to my next question for you.
Mhm.
But like I want to stay on the underwriting right now, and then we're going to
Yeah.
get to the business and we're going to get to the health and all that.
Sure.
I just want to take care of the business first, you know what I'm saying? So when we
Sounds
talk
good.
about from the underwriting process, because a lot of people get excited. They're like, okay, the realtor, I've been, a lot of times you can't even go see the house these days unless you're already pre-approved. A lot of
Yeah.
realtors, "Can I see your paperwork?" Yeah, they don't want to waste
Yes.
their time showing you around the house and you ain't approved. You know what I'm saying? You got like $20 to your name and you're looking at a $500,000 house. So they're not, "Can I see your approval letter?" Okay, you get past that
Yes.
stage and then you start signing the paperwork. So from an underwriting perspective, what
Mhm.
other tips can you give for brothers and sisters that say, "Okay, I have the money. We're gonna not buy any cars, any furniture,
Mhm.
but at the same time, my mom's birthday is coming up. We have a family reunion coming up."
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, what can they do to make sure that as they're going through the underwriting process,
Mhm.
that at the end they're going to be able to close?
So basically, the request or the heads up is to not purchase anything that will require credit initially. And then you also are going to be required, if you have closing costs, they're going to ask for a verification of deposit from your bank to learn if you have enough funds, of which is called cash to close. So if you have a wedding or quinceañera, whatever culture your background you come from that you want to spend money on, so long as it doesn't require you to obtain credit in order to receive those funds, then generally you're not going to have to worry about the debt to income ratio being compromised. And then as far as your funds or cash to close, so long as you do not go beyond the limit of what the required cash to close dollar amount is, you would be fine. So I would just stay within those parameters of not obtaining new credit and not getting your cash to close your liquid funds below the amount that's required for you to close.
Okay, so that means you telling me don't open that American Express card.
Opening an account, it's going to take a little hit because of the inquiry to begin with. And you definitely don't want to be doing any of those things of the like or the sort while you're in the mortgage process. You literally want to sit on your hands as far as financial transactions during that time. For some, it's going to be the greatest investment that you'll ever make in your lifetime. And so I feel like even if you're doing a new construction or a new build, which would be 4 to 6 months of waiting on them to construct the home, you just really want to chill for the time you're in the entire process. If you wanted to really hone in and focus on something, focus on stacking more paper and saving more and consolidating and having a yard sale that will add to your cash to close, or get purging and getting rid of some things that you no longer need or don't want to take to the new property, and applying that to your savings. If you want to put your energies towards anything, I would suggest that.
Great information. And before we take a rewind, I have to ask you this question. I get this question all the time in my email. Where family members,
Mhm.
they'll say, these newlyweds just got married. We want to help them close
Yeah.
on the house. So a lot of family members will say, you know what, I'll give you 10,000, I give you
Yes.
25,000, 30,000 just to sit in your account until the underwriting is closed and then give me my money back. Is that a smart tactic or technique to use?
Well, here I'll tell you what is allowable versus what's smart or not. What is approved with federal guidelines, Fannie or Freddie, as far as the investors, is that you can be gifted funds from a family member to apply towards your closing, but they do have to sign what is called a gift letter, Corey. And a part of that gift letter also says that these funds are not to be returned to the person who granted these funds. So that is huge. I'm so very glad that you raised that question so that we can just, tell it like it is, as far as that's concerned. So if you really are going to gift a family member money towards their closing, do know that your account number will be requested, their account number, and you will be requested to sign an affidavit that says that you do not expect 1 cent of those funds to be returned.
Thanks for that clarification because I hear that all
For
the
sure.
time. I'm gonna just sit 30,000 in your account. Once you
Yeah.
close and y'all move in, I need my bread back. I hear
Yeah.
that all the time. I didn't use that technique because I had the shoes, so I was good. But let's take a
Yes.
rewind real quick. I kind of, normally I warm the guests, so I warmed you up, but I kind of put you in the heater off rip. So let's take it back. Born and raised in Lawrenceville, New Jersey, second half of
Mhm.
your life in Charlotte, North Carolina. At what point coming up did you say, I want to be a mortgage broker? I want to be an underwriting manager. I want to be an author. I want to be a CEO and a founder. Like, at
Mhm.
what point, like, how did that even, matriculate with you?
So, Corey, it's so funny that you asked that because I never sought out to be a senior mortgage broker or a realtor. So I'll tell you a little bit about my professional background first, and then that helps to navigate into my entrepreneurial background. So I actually went to North Carolina A&T State University in Greensboro, North Carolina. Aggie Pride, all the HBCUs out there. And so I went there as a political science major. I actually attended class in what was called Gibbs Hall. I actually was a part of the same department, and as Jesse Jackson, he actually was from my same department. That's where he studied as well. And I basically was law school bound after coming upon completion of my education at A&T. I ended up really developing my faith walk. And so I did two things. I applied to Thomas L. Cooley in Lansing, Michigan, their law school program, and got accepted. And then I also applied to Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary and got accepted as well. And so, all up to that point, Corey, I thought I was going to be an attorney. And then I had this epiphany of, okay, when you're choosing something, you want to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. And I'm like, what has me attracted to being an attorney? And, as a kid, we're groomed, at least in my family, that, the top tier was the doctors and the lawyers. And so I feel like that had a really heavy influence on why I looked at that profession as to be something for me. I felt like I was a good communicator. I'm one who loves to research. So it kind of fit the mold of what I thought what was best for me. But in the same token, I felt a really strong call upon my life within the ministry. I had been active in my local church in Charlotte, from the capacities, a couple of churches there, from, vocal performance and, worship arts team to, at one time, I was a singles ministry pastor and youth worker, a host of different opportunities within the ministry. And so I ended up accepting going to Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. It was a seminary that was birthed by Ivy League graduates. And I spent my time there working on a Master's of Theological Studies with a concentration in Christian counseling. Now, what I loved about going to Gordon Conwell is that it was a non-denominational, and it is because it still currently exists. It's a non-denominational theological seminary. So, Corey, I was sitting in class with atheists and Catholics and Protestants and just people from all different, walks. They didn't necessarily believe in Christianity. Some of them were there just because they thought the Bible was a decent holy book, and they loved the parables and the stories that they read. And so how that benefited me to go to a seminary that had multi denominations, if you will, was that conversations and class discussions were very vivid as a result of that. And so I got a chance to not only to learn apologetics, defending my own faith, but the real value there, Corey, was for me to learn why other people believed what they believe and how they got to follow their own walk. And I think intelligent people can have an appreciation for everyone's story and not just their own. And it either is going to fortify what it is that you believe yourself or cause you to maybe pivot a little bit in what it is that you believe. Either way, I'm here for both because I always want to be challenged as to what it is that I think or believe, because I want to leave room for, as I grow and as I mature and as I'm around other people that can enlighten me, I always want to be available to subscribe to something differently than I may have in the past. So that was a wealth of opportunities that I got from having that type of training and education. So upon graduating with my Master's of Theological Studies, I lived in a widely known banking town, which was Charlotte, North Carolina. Charlotte pivots within the top three between New York, San Francisco, and Charlotte being the top financial cities in the country, at least at that time, Corey. And so, already having lived in New Jersey, I definitely was wanting to leave Greensboro and come back because I had finished my master's in Charlotte, because that was my new home for me. And being that I was in that city, if the most opportunities are in the financial space, you're more than likely are going to get a financial position. So to answer your question, mortgage financing just kind of fell in my lap. I literally, after graduating with my master's, still wasn't sure how is it that I have this training in theological studies, but I'm in a financial city. How do I marry those two disciplines when this town mostly offers a lot of financial services types of positions, but I'm also in the Bible Belt too, being in Charlotte. So I had a conversation with a mentor, and he directed me to a career coach. So that was one of my, sometimes the therapist or the counselor or the advisor, they need their own advisement sometimes. So the advisement that I got then was, hey, I think this is something that could work. A lot of marriages and relationships fail because people can't talk about finance. Of course, there's a place for you in this city. So until that developed, I took positions within some of the larger banks that were headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina. And if I say the bank's name, this is going to date how long ago this was. This was initially First Union and Wachovia, which we now know as Wells Fargo. So the bulk of my professional experience came from those financial institutions. And so I just operated in different capacities within the bank, started out in general banking, and then moved into the mortgage banking space, which happened to be my sweet spot because mortgage financing allowed me to be very much of a consultant with people, which is what ministry, I believe, is in terms of counseling and helping people process through their issues. So it really enabled me to take the consultative approach, marry it with financial services background, and I developed a business within those disciplines for Wells Fargo. And so I did that corporately for a while and then transitioned to, because when you're working for the bank, you're registered. But then when you do it from an entrepreneurial standpoint, you're actually a licensed banker. So that's what I do now. I operate in the capacity of a senior mortgage broker who is licensed, and I work for myself through the division of Nexa Mortgage, because that's the brokerage in which I broker my services out to, because I have a 200 different lending institutions in which I have banking relationships with. So it's almost like, think of it like a car loan. When you go do an application for a car loan, they may have a couple of primary lenders that they're going to send your application to, but there's also a host of other lenders that might be the sweet spot for your loan scenario. So when someone is bringing their mortgage services application to me for, to purchase a home, I have the luxury of shopping for them. There's no need for them to go to Bank ABC, Bank XYZ, and Sunlight Bank. There's no need for that because I have all the relationships. I'm going to take your one application and submit them to the lending institutions that, really specialize in what your scenario is. And so it's really a one-stop shop. And I'll couple that by saying a one-stop shop because I'm also a realtor in Florida. So I can handle either side of the transaction or one side of the transaction. If someone comes to me already, they have selected a realtor, then I'm able to do the mortgage financing for them, or vice versa. If they've gotten their pre-approval from me, then I'm able to present them with the pre-approval and handle the property search. So either instance, I'm fortunate to live in the state of Florida where you're able to do either of the transactions for the borrower or both.
My quick question, I just have one quick question for as far as getting approved for loans and everything. What about commercial? Do you deal mostly with commercial properties or anything like that?
Well, it's a combination of both. Actually, the firm allows for residential as well as commercial deals. And so those products and services, we handle both of those duly. Mhm.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, because like I said, I understand about I've already I just recently purchased a home a couple of years ago, so I totally understand everything that you pretty much broke.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I pretty much understand everything you just broke down as far as
Yeah.
the process of how everything works. But I'm
Mhm.
also a business owner, so I'm also in the process of trying to eventually get to the point where I can own some type of commercial property for
Mhm.
my business. So basically,
Yes.
I just wanted to know how that is pretty much what's that process like. Is it similar to the personal residential
Mhm.
process, or is it a little bit more strenuous? Or obviously, I know about P&Ls and a
Right.
lot of other different documents that they may ask for and request, but I just didn't know if there was anything else additional that they may kind of consider when it goes through that process. So.
Yeah, so I think you hit the nail on the head. I wouldn't say that the process is more strenuous. What I would say is that additional documentation will be required above and beyond what someone would present personally. For instance, you kind of said it already, additional documentation as far as income, such as your profit and loss statements. Those things will be required. You may need to have CPA letters with the CPA or an accounting firm confirming how long you've been in the business. What is your business standing? Do they see the trajectory of the business continuing, thereafter? So there'll be additional bits of documentation that will be needed for the commercial process. Obviously, because it's more sizable lending products. So that's the primary reason why.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary.
And
Right.
just to clarify, Gary, he's the official Black Men Sundays accountant. So this brother he's been doing my taxes for a while now. My wife taxes, I'm a business, she got a business going. And that, he kind of set the stage for my next question when we talk about like commercial real estate for brothers and sisters out here that own businesses, but they say, what, I'm tired of renting a booth, or I'm tired of
Space.
renting, or I'm tired of just, renting in the mall. What, because I know, with the home ownership from the residential, they say, you as long as you put 10% down, and then if you want to just buy a flip property, you put 30% down.
Yeah.
But what percentages and what type of and I know it's different for everybody, but I'm just saying from a general perspective, if I said, you know what, I want Black Men Sundays, I want a spot, but I want to own that spot. I don't want to pay any rent. Is there any different parameters as far as the amount you put down, as far as the percentage that you're paying when you invest in a commercial property?
Yes, and you spoke to that earlier. It is going to vary depending upon the actual loan product. And coming from a broker's perspective, it'll also vary with which lender that we pair your application with. So all of the questions that you're speaking of, they're really going to be lender specific, because no business's credit is going to be the same. No business's loan amount is going to be the same. So without having those intricate details, there's investment programs that, require a certain percentage down, residential and then even commercial. So what you'll want to do is pair yourself with a broker that can actually shop those deals for you to see and present to you, okay, these are the different scenarios. You may have one that doesn't require as much of a down payment, meaning you'll have the ability to have a higher loan to value. And then just choose the scenario that's best for you, because there will be a variance depending upon the application scenario and the actual lender that your application is being paired with.
Okay, great information. And my other question for you is, as a business owner, we're building business credit.
Yes.
How can we use business credit to purchase commercial property?
Well, just very much like the residential scenario, your credit talks about your worthiness of being able to have a loan from a credit standing. Your credit is a history of how well you've performed with having credit, your responsibility with the credit, the timeliness of your credit. And so that's what it really is. It's just a history of how well can we project as an underwriter, as a lender, to be able to see how well this loan will perform. So the credit score is an indicator of to tell the lender what we can project, or the probability of how well this loan will perform, along with the other aspects as far as the income of the business, that is, and then the actual property of itself. So that's what it tells us initially.
Yeah, and I guess just to clarify my question for you, I apologize. If I want to use my business credit only to purchase a commercial property, are you guys still looking at my personal credit as well?
No, not necessarily. If you've had some time in the game, if you have a profile of maybe 5 years or so as a business owner, your personal credit doesn't always have to be added into the scenario. There are instances where it can be included to strengthen your loan profile, but it doesn't always have to be included if you have an extensive history standing on your own as a business.
Great information. Now let's talk about you a little bit. CEO and founder of Maven Leadership Solutions. Let's talk
Yes.
about that a little bit.
Yes, I am the CEO and founder of Maven Leadership Solutions. We are a company that empowers leaders to be faith-focused mavens, to excel in maintaining the visionary approach in order to motivate their leaders to grow exponentially. And I have also written a best-selling book called Growth Zone. This is actually a guide that helps one to accelerate and propel in their faith, finance, and fitness.
Definitely. And that's why I kind of want to lead to my next question. When we talk about, because I feel like on this show, we have the health, wealth conversation. Like the younger
Yeah.
brothers and sisters will say, I ain't worried about my health. I'm trying to get my wealth right. Then the
Yeah.
older brothers will be like, yo, I got my wealth right, but my health's not right. So
Mhm.
let's, and then I like how you integrate faith, finances, and fitness to integrate
Mhm.
growth potential. So let's talk about
Yes.
that.
Yeah. So I'm so glad you said that because, and especially the example that you use, some will have their health or fitness to trump their finance or vice versa. But I'm here to announce that they're one and the same. When you give them all three equal importance, somehow the integration of faith, finance, and fitness helps you to grow exponentially. And so that's a part of the reason why I developed Maven Leadership Solutions, to be able to coach individuals, to learn the ways in which integrating all three of those pillars are going to be essential to help you achieve whatever it is that you're looking to do. And so I have found, just in my own personal story, you talked about my bio, how I moved from Jersey to living in the Carolinas. And then when I became an empty nester, I actually moved to Silicon Valley, the Bay Area, Northern California. And I did that specifically. This is going to sound a little nerdy, but it is what it is. I did a Google search for where do most billionaires live. And so I was thinking that it was New York City, but oddly enough, the actual area is the San Jose, Silicon Valley, Atherton, California, that whole metropolitan there, Palo Alto, California, is where most billionaires live. And I was like, okay, well, sometimes in order to get that person's result, we have to do what that person is doing. So I was like, okay, while my daughter's off in college for the next 4 years, I'm going to put myself on tour. I'm going to move to 4 cities or so over the next 4 years while she's discovering her life. I'm going to do the same in this capacity, as an entrepreneur. And so I did. I literally packed up everything that I had. I had previously sold a couple of homes, and lastly, the home that I had in Waxhaw, North Carolina, and just packed up everything. And I went to Silicon Valley. Now, everyone knows that Silicon Valley is the tech hub in the United States. And then not only the United States, but it's the tech hub of the world. And so I was like, okay, there must be something to this whole technology thing, even though I have a financial background. How do I, you know, infiltrate myself into an environment when all I have is a financial background and real estate background, but I'm going to this tech hub, thus the term FinTech. So I got into financial technologies by way of getting into business consulting and technical writing and things of that nature, because I had already had a consultant background, already had finance, and then just the integration of that. So technical writing looked like, for me, is when subject matter experts would get together with the consultants. They would draft or create or modify different policies and procedures, because I worked for the legal department that was, hosting all of their banking policies and procedures. And so a business consultant, technical writer would meet with subject matter experts about different writings that they currently had, or procedures and say, hey, since this, compliance order had taken place, this has changed. Let's get together and have a mastermind on how we need to update these materials so that we remain in compliance and can avoid being fined by the feds because we want to be in compliance. So that's how I got into FinTech and married those two disciplines. And basically, that's how I got on my path. I then, after being there, when it came time to continue on my tour, if you will, to decide what next city I would move to, I had learned there was all this buzz in Silicon Valley that Miami was going to be the East Coast tech hub. And sure enough, all these companies were deciding to move to Miami. Yes, some of them were moving to Texas, and a lot of it had to do with Texas and Florida being tax-free free tax states. And so I was like, there must be something to this because these companies can rightfully afford to be here, but they're doing a pivot. So once again, I'm going back to that same principle. If I want to be where these billionaires are, I might need to follow their steps. So I believe the biggest thing I want to say here, the strategy has already been written. You just have to do your own digging and researching to figure out, okay, who represents where I want to be, discover their strategy, and repeat the steps. And so that brought me to Miami because I was like, let me get there while I'm on the cusp of all this buzz going on and figuring it out. And so although Miami has not grown to the capacity of Silicon Valley, it is very much on the cusp. There's so many large organizations that are in talks about moving their actual infrastructure to Miami. If don't take my word for it, Google it yourself and just see some very recognizable household names are about to make their move to Miami because indeed it will be the East Coast tech hub. And the reason why Miami specifically is on their radar is because when you consider all the other nationalities that flock to Miami and the other languages, that is just like the sweet spot in order to allow global impact for FinTech because of those reasons. And I can attest to that. When you're living in Miami or specifically Coral Gables, it's like living outside of the country, but not really, because you're there amongst a whole host of different nationalities and backgrounds and different languages. But you still have the US support because you're, a US citizen and those luxuries that we have as US citizens or residents of Florida. And so I definitely understand how cognitively that makes sense for Miami to be the East Coast tech hub. And so that's why I went there as well. So what I see more so than technology like it is in Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley is where more startups happen than any place in the United States. And I actually got certified in startups because of that, because I'm like, okay, obviously, if you want to be an entrepreneur and take on that track, it's probably a good idea to get some certifications in startups, because essentially, if you're going to be a CEO and a founder of an organization, I don't know if you know it or not, but that's a good time to be certified in a startup. So I did that in my downtime. I want to encourage people to use the times when there's COVID or when you're laid off. That's time to chill. It's time to recertify and re-up on your training and education. And so I'm grateful for what we would have coined as the downtime being the time where I got to re-up the things that I needed to do. And so that's one takeaway that I also had with myself. When you get to a place where you feel like you're stuck in your career, you're only feeling that way because you've done everything that you could do with that current skill set. You need more tools for your tool belt. The minute you're laid off, register for a course. The minute lose opportunities in your current scenario. That is God's way, I believe, of saying, hey, you're about to pivot. You need some more fuel or a different type of fuel and get what you need because I'm launching you to someplace where you haven't been before.
I'm gonna ask you the hard question now. Are you
Okay.
enjoying yourself on Black Men Sundays,
I
Queen?
am having a darn good time.
Now, I'm sitting here looking like my head like going, my head about to fall off my neck. I'm like, ew, she's nasty with it, you know. And let's
It's
talk
just like
about
you.
definitely. Here's what, and before I
Yeah.
let you go, because I don't want to hog up your whole Sunday, because I can make this like an easy another 2 hours, but I ain't gonna do that to you. So, but let's talk about, in the beginning, introed and I said, Ali Braswell Jr., his brother, when we talk about the African American Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
The question that I have for you is, when we're talking about friends, obviously you have friends from A&T, friends from Silicon Valley, friends from Miami,
I do.
but
Yeah.
what about friends in professional spaces? And how important is it to make friends in professional spaces that can elevate you?
I will answer that by saying or paraphrasing the quote that I heard Les Brown say. He said, if I can take a look at your 5 closest friends, essentially I can predict, where you're going and also further than that, your income. And that is so true. It is so true. I feel that oftentimes we want to be loyal to the people that we've grown up with, that we've had extensive relationships with. And sometimes, just like in the introduction of my book, I say, in order to get into your growth zone, you have to be willing to sometimes leave everything that you know and love for a season so that you can say yes to yourself and the call that's on your life. And for many of us, that kills it right there because there is an unwillingness to make the sacrifice for that gain. I had a friend in the ministry while I was in California call me and say, Jay, I was thinking about you and I want to share this with you. And so I'm like, okay, what are you gonna say today? Because we would have conversations here or there to kind of encourage each other. And so he said, I think I figured out your superpower. And I said, how do you figure out my superpower? He said, let me just tell you what it is. Your superpower is that you are willing to be uncomfortable for a season, all in the name of the greater good. And I thought about that and I was like, where is the lie? That's it. I didn't even know that that's what I had been doing. Like, I didn't even really calculate the true cost. And I'm not talking about finances, but the true cost, the intellectual property costs and the emotional costs and the physical costs and the mental costs that it was required of me to make a leap to go to a place where I knew no one other than the pastor of the church. But still, you're not going to do life with your pastor. You got to have a community of friends and people to work with, even when you're working from home. So I literally put myself in isolation. That was a cost in order to say yes to myself and the calling on my life. And so he was absolutely 1000% correct that my superpower is I will actually go and sign up and be at the front of the line to make myself uncomfortable to say yes to myself and my calling. For many people, that's where it ends.
Okay, so my next question, why Orlando?
So Orlando, here's my strategy for Orlando. I knew once I got to the East Coast, back to the East Coast rather, I said, okay, I'm in Florida. I'm definitely feeling this, the weather here. My therapist said, yeah, I think warm environments are really good for you because, your energy really does well in that area. And then, so here was the strategy at that point. I said, well, if Florida is definitely going to be the state, then let me decide on the city. I love Miami, but I don't need the pomp and circumstance and the nightlife all the time. I do love it. I love to go visit. I'm actually there quarterly, had friends, and had even thought about, do I need to pivot back? So, I'm still, you know, pondering over that. But the reason why the third city out of the 4 years was Orlando is because I believe when you pick a city to leave in, especially when you have a global call on your life, you need to be located in a city whose airport is going to be conducive to where you're going. So when you, again, a nerdy moment, Corey, when you discover which airports have the most nonstop flights globally, Miami and Orlando neck and neck every year. It's usually one year it's Orlando, then the next year it's Miami, or it's Miami for 2 years. Then they toggle between the two. So what I can say is what I do know is that as long as the state of Florida is for me, I can be found in either Miami or Orlando for those reasons.
Okay, yeah, I was hoping you was gonna say, FinTech coming out Orlando. I can say, let me know. I'm cool with
Well,
Allie. I can get some property where it's dirt and I can invest and be a baller. But
all
you
right.
didn't say that. So
Well,
I was
here's
like,
what
okay.
I'll tell you about Orlando. Tech is here. It's MedTech. So if you have people that are in the medical profession, then they specifically need to zero in on that Lake Nona area. And that's where I used to live when I first began living in Orlando. Technology is here as well. It is the MedTech is specifically in Orlando. So you got the FinTech in Miami as far as Florida, but then you've got the MedTech as far as Orlando.
I feel you, but that's so far, man. Like if I want to go downtown, it's a lot of tolls. That's like $200 a month in tolls, though.
It is, but how people will say, "Oh, well, you don't have the state taxes." I think they make it up with the tolls, to be quite honest with you. So maybe it's a wash, but they get it. They get it through the tolls.
Let's talk about your book, Growth the
Yes.
Zone. Let's talk about like what was the impetus of writing that book?
Well, I wanted to be able to capture my experience of making the decision to actually leave a place that was familiar to me, because I myself was the one that felt like that I was stuck, that I had reached my highest capacity with where I was. And I had lived in Charlotte for such a long time and raised my daughter, had a family there, and I was just ready for something new. I wanted a new and a fresh beginning. And I knew, as a matter of fact, when I was in my early 20s, I had visited there actually for my honeymoon at the time. And even then, I made a decision at some point, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I'm going to live here. And I have to be very careful, Corey, with the things that I say, because when I tell you whatever I release from my lips in due season, they appear and it happens. And so that just speaks to being very intentional about what it is that you want to do. And so sure enough, after putting other priorities ahead of that desire, after the completion of those things, then I got back to what I said I was going to do, and I actually moved there. So I think you have to be really intentional about what it is that you say and what you put out there in the atmosphere, because we give life to the things that we intend to do by just saying them.
I want to go back to the health and wealth conversation.
Hmm.
I see you wake up, you cycle every morning,
Yes.
you read the good book, you
Hmm.
take multivitamins,
Yeah.
and you drink a plant-based protein shake. Let's talk about the health part before we get out of here. Because we black folks,
Yes.
we need to know. Because I wake up, eat bacon and eggs, catfish and cheese grits. You know what I'm saying? Let's
Yeah.
go.
So you bring me to an interesting devotion that I read. I believe it was last week, and it talked about honoring God with the food choices that you make. And just hearing that in and of itself made me take a step back. And I'm like, I heard Dr. Cindy Trim say, it should not be any wonder as to why cancer is on the rise, because if we are a people, if we are a society that eats mostly dead things, then it makes sense. as to why we would have cancer running rampant. And so I can't ignore, when we hear things, I think we're at that moment that we hear them, we are held accountable for the knowledge that has come before us. And so, what decisions I've made, and I'm not perfect because I still have the cravings, and there's certain things that are just a part of, my grooming or how I came up, or, that are still a part of you. But I've made a conscious decision to become more disciplined by honoring God, even with my food choices. When you do it that way, Corey, even what you eat is considered worship. You know why? Because you're honoring Him with the choices that you're making. You could be a person who, like, for instance, I'll just be totally transparent. I am 8 pounds from my goal, my fitness goal. And so I have hired a trainer to be able to help me with those goals, because I'm a slender frame, but I want to bulk up a little bit more, as far as muscular, and have more of an athletic body type. And so I feel like I have full autonomy in which to be able to design that with the choices that I'm making with nutrition, with my commitment to cardio, and now coupling that with strength training. And so it's just really is discipline, because you want to honor God through what you're putting in your body. Because I'm taking care of myself now, so that when I'm 70 or 80, I don't want to be a burden to my daughter. I don't want to be a burden to whomever my caregiver is, spouse or anything, or any other family member. I'm doing my due diligence with my body, number one, because I'm grateful to have the activity of my limbs. There's people that are our age that are immobile, and I don't take that for granted. So every time I'm in the gym, every time I'm walking, it is a celebratory moment that I get to be in the gym. It's not that I have to do this or I'm doing it grudgingly. I actually get to show up at the gym, and I get to show up with my whole person, with everything within me is working, and I have movement and I have flexibility. Of course, you need to do your stretching and things of that nature, but I get to be there, and I get to be mobile while I'm there, and I get to exhaust myself. I get to burn fat. I get to get strength conditioning. I get to have my hormones balanced, because I'm doing all of the things that will help me to be productive. It's what I get to do, and it's honor. Yeah.
Jennifer J. McNeil, thanks for coming on Black Men Sundays. When I say you killed the show, you
Oh,
did your thing. Salute my
to
man
God be
Ali
the
Braswell.
glory.
Yeah. Amen. Salute to Ali Braswell Jr., African American Chamber of Commerce, brother. I'm glad we linked up, because
Yeah.
when we have these conversations as Black people, we have these conversations privately, but now we're on a public platform. So I just want to thank you again for coming on, and don't think this is gonna be the last time you hear from me. We're
No,
gonna
I
link
hope
up,
not.
and you in the city beautiful too, and I'm in the city beautiful too. We're gonna have to
Yes.
link up. We're gonna have to link up. We're gonna have to do some things. So, if you have any initiatives, community based, that's
Mhm.
what we do with Black Men Sundays. Again, we're a business and a podcast. The business and the podcast are congruent. I'm using geometry terms on y'all for y'all brothers that didn't go to school. But again,
Yes.
thanks for coming on the show, Jennifer McNeil, aka Jay McNeil. We appreciate you. We appreciate your time, and have a good day.
Thank you. I just want to call everybody's attention to my book is sold on Amazon as well as Barnes and Noble platforms. It is called Growth Zone. And it's Jennifer McNeil. Also, I do provide senior mortgage broker services as well as real estate services. You can reach me with Century 21 Edge in Florida for the real estate services, as well as Nexa for the mortgage financing services. And I can be reached also if you want to subscribe to my YouTube channel. It is JEI_speaks, SPEAKS. as well as the same handle for my Instagram. And you can DM me there for all things real estate, mortgage, and Maven Leadership Solutions. And so my website there is Maven, M-A-V-E-N, leadershipsolutions.com. That's how you can find me. Thank you so much, Corey, and happy Father's Day to all the fathers. I definitely want to acknowledge each and every one of you for your hard work and acts of services and love and time that you give each of your children. And even if you're not a dad specifically, if you're sowing into a child's life with your time, your talent, or even your resources, I just want to acknowledge every father or someone who acts in the role of a father on today. Happy Father's Day.
It's a black man Sunday. Time to put all childish things away.